Uzbekistan. After the massacres in 2005, you will remember hundreds of people were massacred, and the European Union woke up to the realities of Uzbekistan and they enacted sanctions. 2009, these were lifted. Not because it was better, but perhaps because they were doing all of these deals, including the military bases with Uzbekistan. We believe that, intelligent sanctions, targeted sanctions, what should be now enacted on the individuals who are responsible for this within the regime, and also against those entities that are responsible for the repression, including the security services, the prison services, and so on. And yes, well, we hope that it could happen soon, because there's no progress to report about. It is as bad, in many ways worse, this report documents. In some areas it's worse than it was in 2009, or 2005 even, when the sanctions were enacted.
Gemma?
My name is Gemma Kurzke, and I'm from Uzbekistan Press Freedom. I was quite astonished to hear about your optimism, because the shift in US foreign policy just shows the opposite of what you're talking about. And I would be interested to hear from you perhaps more concrete arguments which you believe show that there could be some interest in the European Union or even in Germany to hold up this kind of sanctions or to have more pressure on Uzbekistan. You had talks about Uzbekistan already with officials, so do you see, for example, in the foreign ministry any evidence for change of mind? Because so far you hear that the defense ministry wants to hold Termes, and that's the most important argument.
I mean, our main discussions in the foreign ministry are coming. So, as I said, I think let's not be naive. Let's not expect huge developments. As you said, you pointed to significant setbacks on Uzbekistan. In the US in September, the dropping of sanctions in 2009, and so on. But we think we think it makes a difference to present new evidence to Western governments. We think that that there's an element that we can use that to draw public attention to their embarrassing positions on Uzbekistan, essentially. And we hope that that will have an effect in at least making them more outspoken and more rigorous in their relationship with Uzbekistan, and less easy for them to hide behind the EU's human rights dialogue, for instance. So, no naivety on our part, but we think realistically there is a chance for some progress to change the argument.
Ich möchte noch dazu fügen, dass die Bundesregierung, die anderen Akteure dort, sich auch fragen müssen, was sagen sie eigentlich nach 2014, wenn sie alle weg sind? Werden sie dann plötzlich aus dem Nichts das laut anprangern? Da müssen sie sich fragen lassen, warum haben sie vorher geschwiegen? Das heißt, es ist jetzt an der Reihe der Bundesregierung und der anderen Akteure, sich zu positionieren. Und was wir fordern, sind starke Statements im Sinne der Menschenrechte. Dann auch nur machen solche Trainingskurse wie Habeas Corpus und sowas überhaupt nur Sinn, wenn man das verknüpft mit der starken Aussage, was da passiert.
I think one other observation that we've had in some of our conversations is that there's not a uniform view among all the diplomats, and many who have followed the region for longer periods of time, even some within the Pentagon, for example, that I've interacted with, have recognized that the policy being implemented right now is a short-term strategy, and that, of course, there's always the idea that were there to be a more vocal criticism of the human rights situation, that the mercurial, irrational President Karimov would simply kick out the international community, close down the bases, as he did after Andijan, And I think our response to that, of course, is twofold. One, that 2011 looks different than 2005. Afghanistan is unstable. The Uzbek government is very paranoid about its own prospects, especially after the Arab Spring, and will always need and crave the recognition and the support of the West and relies on it. And number two, as Jan said before, the sort of narrow support for security interest is really just a short-term strategy, that these states are stable until one day they're not. And the West has to position itself to be on the right side of history, because as internet penetration grows in Uzbekistan, ordinary Uzbeks are following what stances Germany is taking, the EU is taking, and the US is taking, and they will remember. So it's simply smart, not only from a human rights perspective, but from a geopolitical perspective, to adopt a human rights approach, a long-term approach to the region.
I think, Steve, that's your question.
Well, there's been many changes to the Constitution. As we know, Karimov is now into his third term. The Constitution designates only 2 terms that are allowed for the president to serve, and some have speculated that this is a way for Karimov to, in good conscience, argue that the Constitution has now been amended and therefore he can run again as a new candidate with no prior record, because it's a new term, not 7 but 5. So I think there's absolutely there's no reason for optimism in terms of that new change.
This is, as we see it, one of the remaining, clear-cut dictatorships. And why is there general optimism long term? Because the long trend line is that dictatorships are going away. You go back we're now in Berlin. You go back to the Cold War era. There were many more dictatorships than democracies in the world. Now there are 3 times as many democracies as dictatorships in the world, and the Arab Spring is accelerating that further, which means there will be more attention on the remaining ones. So the cost of doing business, as usual, with the kind of a regime that is in Uzbekistan, will grow. That comes on top of the military Western campaign in Afghanistan going down. So there will be less need for bases, less need for access. But the main thing is that our cause is winning. That's how we see it.